Hey everyone, and welcome back to Nerd Center. Today we're going to be doing a video that I've been wanting to do just to have a little fun. Today we're going to be looking at all of these superhero cartoons that have been made over the years, and there's been quite a few. I believe there's 43 on this list that I have right here. And we're going to be ranking them on this tier list that I've created. And so this has been, as I've went through as many shows as I could possibly think of. I'm pretty sure I did not leave anything out. I didn't count things like animes and just a couple of little oddballs that I didn't consider a show, but these are animated, ongoing television series, even if they only just got a season. All animated, all cartoons, and we're going to be going through and ranking them between legendary and not good. And then there is a few that I have never watched, so I will not judge those too harshly and put them in that bottom tier. But without further ado, let's kind of get into this and start with this first show we got. First show we got is Avengers United They Stand, which is a really short-lived Avengers show in the 90s with a bunch of characters that, they weren't really like the top tier Avengers. They were like Hank Pym, Wonder Man, Hawkeye, Tiger was in it. Like, it wasn't like, they really didn't showcase the top tier Avengers, and they made all these tech gadgets thing, like they were trying to sell toys or something. I don't know for sure, but it wasn't really the best show, so I'm gonna kind of put it at not good. Like, I don't know, I'm a big Avengers fan, but the show wasn't really that great. So that's kind of a disappointment. Next up, we have Batman Beyond, which is one of my favorite characters in DC. I really like this show, and it kind of is a sequel series to Batman the Animated Series. It's in that same DCA universe. Um, Obviously, now I'm watching it again. You could definitely see flaws of it, but it's still a fun show. So I am going to put it in the great category because I do think it's a great show. Like I said, there's some flaws now that I've rewatched it, but it's still a pretty cool show. Oh boy. Now here we have the Fantastic Four series from the 60s, 70s time, which is the show that at least some people might be infamous for the fact that they got rid of the Human Torch because they didn't want kids to see the guy was on fire and try to put themselves on fire or something. That's the things I've heard about it. So they've replaced the Human Torch with Herbie the robot, and so this is kind of a really silly old cartoon. So like normally you can look at the old cartoons and you think, well, they're just not that good, but some old cartoons are good. So this one I would just generally put in the not good. Especially the fact that they didn't even actually have the whole Fantastic Four in the show. Now we have Green Lantern, the animated series. If you notice when you look at this list, there's a lot of shows on here that were like, they kind of made the show after a movie came out to like kind of capitalize on the popularity, or maybe not popularity of the Green Lantern movie, I guess, but like the popularity of being known in the world at the moment. So the Green Lantern show came out, I believe, right around the time that the movie came out. And I know there's a pretty good cult of people who really like this show, but I didn't think it was that amazing. But there's a lot of people that liked it. So, but I would definitely put it at average because it was all right, but it wasn't my cup of tea. And I don't know, the animation wasn't that great for me, that style. Next up, we have Guardians of the Galaxy, which is actually one of the newer shows on here. This is one of those Disney XD shows where they're trying to basically copy everything from the MCU, which I despise and I hate when they try to copy from the MCU because like I want it to be more comic accurate. I don't want it to be copying the movies. They should be movies and the show should be copying the comics. So this was another in that vein of Avengers Assemble and Ultimate Spider-Man, which we'll get to those eventually. But this one I'm gonna say average because I did watch it and some of it. I didn't watch the whole series, but it wasn't the worst thing ever. But it wasn't definitely not a good show. Coming up next, we have Harley Quinn, which is a show that started on DC Universe and transferred to HBO Max. And it's basically just a kind of a stupid show. It wasn't the worst show. And it's, they're trying to just be Harley, be adult. So, there's violence and all sorts of stuff. So it's one of those more of adult cartoons. I'm definitely put an average. Like, I feel like it did alright, but then they had to cram in that stupid Poison Ivy Harley thing at the end because they have to have those two get together. Because reasons. Even though they had all this time where they built up for like 2 seasons, like Poison Ivy and Kite Man being together, and then they just shove it to the side because they have to have the two girls get together. And it's like, whatever. So like the only good thing I can say is they didn't force the use of the whole show like the second the show started, but it still was felt forced just because they had to do it, even though they built up these other storylines where Harley didn't really feel like style that connected to Ivy, and then Ivy was off with Kite Man, but whatever. I'll say average because there's worse. I've seen worse. Hulk and the Age of Smash is actually I actually kind of liked this show. Like out of all the shows that they had on those Disney XD time slots, like it wasn't the worst, but it's definitely just still an average show. So I wouldn't put it too high, but it wasn't that bad, honestly. At least I didn't think at the time. Next up, we have is Iron Man Armored Adventures, which I believe was another kind of trying to capitalize on the movie with Iron Man coming out not too long after the original Iron Man aired in theaters. Um, I could the same thing with this as like as Green Lantern. I feel like there's quite a few people who actually really enjoyed this show, but I never got into it. The animation I didn't like, and so I'm honestly gonna put not good because I didn't even think it was that average. I just didn't like it, so that's going in my not good section. Next up, we have Batman the Brave and the Bold. Batman the Brave and the Bold is interesting because when it first came out, I thought it was kind of silly. Like, all the Golden Age stuff, a lot of stuff, especially in the last season, I think there was a lot of silly stuff. And I watched it and I think this is what to seem like Batman. It's not serious enough, it's not dark enough. This is too campy. But then when I rewatched it when I was older, like I really appreciate it more using the Golden Age characters and styles and the team ups and stuff. And the stories are actually pretty good. And there's a lot of darker episodes too, and there's fun ones. So I feel like that I'm gonna put it as great because I really enjoyed this show, especially after a second watch. When I was a little bit older, there is a not a single, there is a musical episode which is kind of weird, but it doesn't take away from the whole series. Spider-Man 2017. Another one. This came out after the Tom Holland movie started airing, and I did watch some of it, and it was definitely not that good. I did know that they brought in some stuff, elements from the comics, even though they weren't quite accurate to the comics. So I did enjoy it. They pulled some more from the comics and all from the movies, but it was still wasn't that great. But I don't know if not good. I'll put it in average because I'll put it in average. Yeah, it wasn't horrible. X-Men 92. This one is a classic. I didn't watch it till I was older, and it is a really good show, and I love how they pull basically slap storylines just straight from the Uncanny X-Men comics, with just maybe a couple of roster changes here and there. But this is really good. I like that's more shows should do that. Just rip it straight from the comics. I don't care if it's a copy and paste. Just like give us the good stuff, comic accurate. This one is one of the legends of comic shows, and even though I think there are shows that I enjoyed more than this, that just because of its status and how it's impacted, I'm going to put it as legendary because of such, and it's going to be ruined probably when the MCU is tied in the MCU with X-Men 97. We'll probably talk about that eventually, and I'll review it, but this was definitely a legendary one. Next up, we have The Batman, which came out in the mid-2000s, a different take on the Batman and used more new, different animation styles, so that could, cover, give or take what you think about that with Joker and some of the weird or different styles. But I like this show. It was a really good show. It was like 5 seasons, and I'm gonna definitely put it as a great because it was a great show. Justice League Action. Justice League Action. See that? I kind of take that as like the Teen Titans Go of Justice League, where they were like short episodes. I guess they were geared more towards kids. Like I didn't when it came out, I was gonna try it more, but I never saw it come on. I saw a few episodes and it's just really kind of silly. And I can't believe they got back like actors like Kevin Conroy and these good voice actors to play in this show. So not good, but it's really kind of sad they wasted a Justice League revival on this as opposed to making a follow up to the original Justice League show or something new. Would have been much better and preferable. Spider-Man. Oh, this is a good one. This one is a special place because this one is the first show that I watched, like the first superhero cartoon show that I watched that kind of started everything. Like I watched Batman and Superman and everything in the 90s. I didn't watch the X-Men at the time, but I did watch Spider-Man was the first show that got me into all this. And so because of the nostalgia, I want to put it in the legendary, but the legendary, but I don't know if it's great. I'm gonna put it in the legendary just because of my personal, like, I would say objectively I would put it in the great column, but just because of how it's personally tied to me and my childhood, I'm going to put it in legendary for this one. Wolverine X-Men is kind of underrated. This one was like a one season show. It was on, like, I think it was on Nicktoons, so it was kind of off to the side in a different channel that I didn't watch much because we didn't have Nicktoons. That was on the extended channels that you had to get the higher packages for at the time. But when I rewatched it afterwards, I think it was on Netflix and Disney Plus at some point. This one was a pretty good show, and it showcased a pretty accurate X-Men. So I'm going to put it as average because it wasn't, say, the best X-Men show, but it was pretty good, and I think it could have had room to expand more had it stayed on the air. Next, we have Justice League, and I'm counting Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, even though if you look at some things, it's counted as two different series. But I consider it just like, instead of 2 seasons of each, it's just like 4 seasons. Like, that's how I look at it. It's the same show to me. But this is like the ultimate, like, of the DCAU top shows and superhero shows in general. So I'm definitely putting it as great. Would put it legendary. Legendary is tough. Like, that's rare things that I'm gonna put up in legendary, but it's definitely a great show, and it definitely got a lot of people with these other characters besides just like Batman and Superman, getting to know these other characters that we all, kids that grew up in this era, really care about those characters, and this was a really great show. This one is probably not one, I don't even know if everyone knows about the show. The Legion of Superheroes, it was a short-lived 2 season show, and I rewatched it, and it's not bad. It's got Superman coming back from the past to be in the future with the Legion of Superheroes, and it goes through and it kind of showcases all the different Legionnaires who are very kind of obscure unless you're like really into DC Comics. And they've rebooted the Legion of Superheroes so many times, it's kind of hard to keep everything straight. But I think it did a pretty good job of casing all the Legion of Superhero characters, and the animation's alright, but I'm gonna put it as average. Now, nothing great or amazing, but it was definitely not any, by far, a bad show. Oh boy, here we go. Aquaman. I added Aquaman. This is the old cartoon series, the one that you think of when you think about Aquaman being goofy, I guess, riding the seahorse and all that. So honestly, I haven't watched the show, so I am going to put it in the never watched section, but it made Aquaman, it really hurt his image just because people thought he was so stupid. But Aquaman's a pretty cool character, and he's had some pretty good comic runs, I think, but those are more newer ones that I prefer. Like the Rebirth, the first part of the Rebirth era had a good Aquaman run before they switched writers. But I'm gonna put it in the never watch because I can't really judge it for sure to say. Fantastic Four: World's Greatest Heroes, another show that came out after the movies, and this was also a one season show. And the Fantastic Four haven't gotten a bunch of great shows, but definitely this is probably the best, and I'm gonna put it in average. Oh, here we go. Teen Titans Go. Yes, I added Teen Titans Go. Like I mentioned, it's like the Justice League Action was like the Teen Titans Go of Justice League shows. So Teen Titans Go, the Teen Titans Go of superhero shows. It's the same thing, right? They brought back all these characters and these voice actors that they could have just made more of Teen Titans. And being that they show started in like 2013, 2012, something like that, it probably wouldn't have been too horribly woke and bad like it would if they remade Teen Titans now. And they could have given us, like, I feel like one more season or something. Then anyway, not good. Not good. We'll talk more about Teen Titans when I get to it. Spider-Man. This one is the 67 Spider-Man, the one where you see the guys pointing each other, that kind of show. So I first saw this like on a VHS when I had this Spider-Man up here from the 90s, had it at the end of the show, and they showed me like the very first episode, I think, where Uncle Ben gets killed and all that. So it's like the classic original. So, but it's not that great. I mean, it's a little boring, but it's not bad. So I'm gonna put an average because it's a classic. Then we have Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. That's one of my personal favorites. And as you'll see eventually, as I have some plans for some videos on it, Avengers vs. Mightiest Heroes is the definitive Avengers. Like, Forget anything MCU, they're not definitive. Like, not that I have a problem because The Avengers is my favorite movie of all time, but this show, this is the definitive Avengers, and it's a great show. Would I put it legendary? It's close. It's really close, but it's going to be in the great column for me. Here's one that people probably might not remember. Beware the Batman. That one was like a really odd show that came out in Cartoon Network, and I don't even like. I started watching it and then it kind of disappeared, and I think they ended up airing the end some weird time because I never saw it, the end of it. But it was a weird kind of art style. It had Katana being like Batman's sidekick, and I wouldn't put it as good. It wasn't that great, and like I said, it was kind of a waste of a Batman show. Here you go. Here's a good one. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Kind of an odd combination, adding Firestar and Iceman to be teaming up with Spider-Man. But it's a pretty fun little series. It's kind of in the same vein as the Spider-Man 67 show. And I'm going to put it as average because, like I said, obviously if you watched it now, it probably wouldn't be up to the quality of these other, maybe up here in the great column. But it's a pretty neat little show, especially for the time it was made in. Now, this Incredible Hulk is just so confused. It's not like the live action because this is all cartoons. This is the show from the 90s, and this one was also one season, but this one was actually a pretty good show. Like, there was some, like, silliness of the 90s and stuff to it, but it was actually pretty good and one of the better. Like, there were several shows. I mean, you think of Spider-Man and X-Men as being the top, like, Marvel shows of that era. But there were several other ones, and the Hulk was probably the best of those other tier of ones. I don't know if I'd put it as great, but I am gonna put it in the average. But it's pretty good though. Now this one was a odd, short-lived Spider-Woman series, which is also in the same vein of these older Spider-Man shows. And I think Spider-Man debuted in it. I haven't watched this one, so I'm going to put it there. But and it was definitely in this kind of vein, so I don't know if it was any good. Here's one, Static Shock. Static Shock was part of the DCAU with Batman, the animated series, Justice League, Superman, animated series, and all that. And this was a good show, and it handled things so much better than it would have nowadays. Like, it was able to introduce some issues and topics without kind of forcing them on you in a more of a kid-friendly manner that was appropriate for that setting. And it also had other good superhero stories, and so it really shows if you wanted a more diverse TV show like nowadays, like, they should look back to something like Static Shock as a good example of how you could do that without beating your audience over the head with things. But as far as overall, I'm not going to put it quite in the great. It's going to go in the average for me, even though it was a pretty good show. But I wouldn't probably elevate it to the great show. Next up, we have Super Friends, and this is another one that's kind of campy, goofy, superheroes. I don't know if I'd put it in average or not good. Like, this had the Wonder Twins in it. This had Aquaman that was goofy. I'm gonna put it as, I don't know. I'm gonna put it as average because it was kind of campy and goofy, but I don't think it was horrible. So I'm gonna put it in average. And here's one, the Spectacular Spider-Man. I'm just going to go ahead and put this up in the great section because what I liked about the Spectacular Spider-Man was that it married together the old comic Spider-Man stories kind of with a new mix to them. So it took things like Doc Ock battles and Sinister Six battles and Venom and all that storylines, and they kind of meshed it together with their new takes on it, but still respected the classic material. And it was a good show. One of the ones that was canceled too soon. I think this was during all the time with the rights issues, and it switched from like Kids WB and it went to Disney XD for the second season. Definitely worthy of more screen time than it got, but it's a great one. Now, Superhero Squad show. Now, people could look at that. I don't know people's opinions on the Superhero Squad show. People could look at it like Teen Titans Go for all I know, but I love the Superhero Squad show. I thought it was great. It showcased the whole Marvel Universe, and it was kind of kiddie silly sometimes, but it was a pretty good show. But just to stay with consistency, I'm going to put it as average, but it could be great because I really enjoyed it. Next, we have Spider-Man Unlimited. Spider-Man Unlimited was a show I actually remember watching it as a kid. I loved the Spider-Man costume. I thought it was a really cool costume. But the whole scene of Spider-Man going to alternate Earth and dealing with the High Evolutionary and all this stuff that's going on, Venom and Carnage are thrown in, all this alternate Earth type of stuff. It really wasn't that great of a show, so I'm gonna put it in the not good. But the Spider-Man costume was really cool, and the theme was really cool. So kind of like there were good elements to it, but the general idea of this didn't feel like Spider-Man. Anyway, this is Superman, the old classic Flesher cartoons. Now I have watched these, and I'm gonna put them in the not good. I know a lot of people could put them as like a classic Superman, but every single episode, I know this was like old, so I guess it's good for the time, but every episode was exactly the same. There was no variety at all. Lois Lane got kidnapped. Superman saved him from evil scientists. Like that was like, but there was like in a different location, or maybe there was a monster attached or something. I don't know. But this was the same every episode, and it got so boring. So that's why I put it in the not good, even though it was made in like the 40s, so it's pretty good probably for that era. And like I was saying about old shows not being judged too harshly for the oldness, but they were just kind of boring to me, so that's why I would put it there. So here we have Fantastic Four from the 90s. Not good. Like the animation was kind of poor and goofy, and compared to the other shows Marvel was putting out in the 90s, it did not live up to the standards. Like I said, the Fantastic Four have not gotten a great show, but it's definitely on the not good section. Superman, the animated series. In the same vein, it kind of lives in the shadow of Batman, the animated series, but it really kind of helped elevate Superman in the DCAU, so I'm going to put it in the great section. Really, a lot of these shows I feel like personally I like them, but I can definitely say this is probably in the great column. Teen Titans, it's going in the great section as well. Teen Titans, what I think about Teen Titans is a really good show. Like, there's an anime feel to it that I don't particularly, because that's not really my thing that I care about that much, like the expressions and the art in some areas, but the story and the characters, everything is really great in this show. It delves into so many different things, and it definitely, I think it needed one more season to kind of finish wrapping everything up. The way it ended, I just feel like it needed one more. Never again do I want them to make it because they'll screw it up, but it was a great show. It was definitely a great show. So we come back down here. Oh my gosh. Avengers Assemble. Not good. This is a joke of a show. They canceled Earth's Mightiest Heroes for Avengers Assemble. This was kiddie garbage. Oh, it irks me so much that they canceled this great Avengers show for this. To try to capitalize on the MCU. Like, I don't want the MCU. I don't want to see the MCU. I can watch the MCU if I want to watch the MCU. I want a comic accurate. We had a comic accurate show, and they replaced it for this. I'm really sour about it. I'm really sour about this show. Here we have The Adventures of Batman, which is the old show. I don't remember if this is the one that Adam West and Burt Ward played the voices in. I never got to see. I think these are the ones that like team up with Scooby-Doo and stuff. But I never watched this show, so I'm gonna put it down there. But we imagine it was kind of in the vein of Super Friends and these old Spider-Man shows, kind of in quality. The Ultimate Spider-Man. I watched Ultimate Spider-Man, the whole show, and it's not the worst thing. I'll put it in average because I watched it and it wasn't bad, and there was some shows that were good, but it still kind of fell into that. It had to tie into the MCU character. Okay, Spider-Man wasn't in MCU at the time, but you get my point. It kind of had that look and art style that I didn't care for, but it wasn't the worst show. Oh, here we go. We got something new. What If? What If was pretty bad. Pretty bad. Like, the What If stories they picked were not good. Like, they could have been so much more creative. There was a couple good ones that were alright, but like some of them, like the T'Challa one was awful. Like, that was so cringy. The T'Challa being Star-Lord one, the Captain Carter one, I know a lot of people talked about that one was bad. And like there was a couple good ones. I think like the zombie one was pretty good, and I want to say that was the one with the Avengers all dying wasn't too bad. But it was not a good show, and it was tied to the MCU, so in Phase 4, so that kind of hence to why it wasn't good, but not good. X-Men Evolution was one that I liked, and I loved watching when I was a kid. I'm gonna put it in average. It's a good show. It kind of may take away because it is a lot of more high school drama into it because they made them all teenagers in high school for this. Only like Storm and Wolverine and Beast are adults, and everyone else like Cyclops and Nightcrawler, and they're all in high school. So that mileage could vary for some people, but it was a pretty good show, and like the Apocalypse stuff, the Apocalypse arcs were pretty good. I love those. But I'm trying to be I'm kind of mixing my objective of the show and my feelings on it. But it was definitely someone I liked and I enjoyed, but I'm going to put it as average, and it's not going to kind of cross into my great. All right, here we go. Batman the Animated Series. We haven't had one up here in a while, so we're going to go and put it in the legendary. The best TV show of all time, in my opinion. The best TV show. The definitive Batman. The same way the Avengers are the definitive Avengers and Earth's Mightiest Heroes. This is the definitive Batman. These are the definitive, every version of the character that I think of from this show. And normally you'd think, the comics first, but this kind of inspired even the comics. Like, it was just kind of transcendent to superhero shows, and it will never be topped. Not even with Caped Crusader, which I don't know what to say about Caped Crusader. I will probably cover that the same way I'm going to cover X-Men 97, probably. We'll see. But best show ever. Definitely worthy of legendary status. Actually, I'm going to put it over here just so you know it's at the top of the legendary status. A couple more left. Iron Man from the 90s. It wasn't really that good. I mean, it wasn't that horrible, but it wasn't that enjoyable. It was kind of boring. It kind of goes with the Fantastic Four. So, last but not least, Young Justice. I made a video on Young Justice. I don't know how to rate Young Justice, to be quite honest with you, because Young Justice, it started off being really good, and then it went downhill so hard in the last couple seasons. I don't know, because like, I'm gonna put it in average just for the fact that it dipped so hard in the last couple seasons. If it never came back on and it just was the first 2 seasons, I would have put it in great. But we got too bad, too good. That averaged it out. But anyway, this is my final tier for this. Batman, X-Men, Spiderman in my legendary. We got a bunch of good shows and a great. A lot of average, as you'd imagine, and some not so good ones. So this was my tier list. Tell me, you guys, what did you think? Did you agree with this tier list? Do you think I'm dead wrong? Do you think these are the best shows and the worst shows? What would you do differently? I'm going to link the template for this in the description, so if you want to make your own, go for it. Feel free. It'll be linked in the description, so you can do that. And until next time, guys, we'll talk to you later. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel.